Sportsmanship can sometimes feel like a trait from the past, but Lewis Hamilton proved otherwise at the 2017 Hungarian Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen were leading the race, with Mercedes teammates Valtteri Bottas third and Lewis Hamilton fourth. But the Englishman felt he could go faster and challenge the two Ferraris.
I'm just going to let you pass into turn 1. You can go strap mode 3. Ferraris are just up ahead. Lewis will let you go by if he can't get past Räikkönen.
As the checkered flag grew closer, Hamilton's pace proved not to be enough to overtake Räikkönen for second place. But with the championship still being hotly disputed and Vettel leading the way, many thought Hamilton would keep his place to maximise his championship points. But instead, he slowed down on the last turn, giving the podium position back to Bottas.
Okay, mate, thanks for that. Yeah, it's a gentlemanly thing to do. Well done.
Lewis, it's James. Thank you very, very much for doing that. Thanks, Lewis.
The team kept the promise, which I'm really happy about and really thankful for the team that we swapped again, in the end. So and big thanks to Lewis as well, because I don't think every teammate would have done the swap back, if you're running for a podium place.
Rubens, it's last lap. Let Michael pass for the championship. Let Michael pass for the championship, Rubens, please.
These infamous words prompted one of Formula One's most controversial moments. At the 2001 Austrian Grand Prix, Ferrari ordered Rubens Barrichello to give up his second place in favour of teammate Michael Schumacher. Team orders weren't a rare sight back then, but given that the Austrian Grand Prix was only the 6th event of the season, many thought it was too soon to be making use of them.
The team has asked me to do that.
The episode could have been a fleeting one if Ferrari hadn't repeated the script 1 year later, at the very same race, this time for what would have been only Barrichello's second career victory. The outraged public booed as the drivers walked to the podium, where Schumacher broke protocol to give Barrichello the top step, a token gesture that would cost him and Ferrari a $1 million fine. Later on in the season, and with a 5th title already under his belt, Schumacher sportingly paid his teammate back by trying to go equal over the line, a move that gave victory to Barrichello by 11 thousandths of a second.
Today I thought it was a good opportunity to go equal over the line. We tried, we failed by a little bit.
Helmets are a part of racing drivers' DNA, but in 1996, and under the torrential rain on the streets of Monaco, David Coulthard had to make an unusual request to Michael Schumacher.
96 Monaco, in the warm-up, I couldn't get to full power. The track was so wet, the car was so difficult to drive, and I just couldn't see. My RI helmet at that time didn't have the double visor that is now common in Formula One, which helps with the anti-fogging. I went to Michael and said, can I borrow a helmet? Which is a very unusual thing for, I guess, drivers to do, but he didn't hesitate. He was like, yeah, okay, no problem. And I raced and finished second in that Grand Prix.
Formula One's stories of dangers and loss go hand in hand with those of great courage and humanity, when drivers stop being rivals to become each other's protectors. In 1978, Lotus's Ronnie Peterson and McLaren's James Hunt were two of the drivers involved in a multi-car first-lap crash at the Italian Grand Prix. Peterson's car hit the barrier at high speed and caught fire. Hunt ran immediately to his aid and managed to pull him out of the flames. Peterson escaped the incident itself with severe leg injuries, but unexpected overnight complications would take the life of one of the most beloved and highly regarded drivers of his time. Imagine a driver calling out an unfair penalty for his only rival for the World Championship. That's what Stirling Moss did for his fellow Englishman Mike Hawthorn after winning the 1958 Portuguese Grand Prix. Moss crossed the line with a one-lap advantage over Hawthorn's Ferrari, but on his cool-down lap, Moss found out that Hawthorn had spun and stalled on the escape road. Afterwards, Hawthorn was disqualified, accused of driving in the wrong direction after rejoining the track. But Moss went to the stewards immediately. He'd witnessed the event and knew the claim to be false. Moss's evidence swung the decision and no action was taken, and Hawthorn kept his 7 points. 2 races later, Moss would lose the championship to Hawthorn by a single point, going on to become widely recognised as the greatest driver never to win the Formula One World Championship. In 1956, the title fight went down to the wire between 3 drivers. 3-time world champion Juan Manuel Fangio, his young Ferrari teammate Peter Collins, and Maserati's Jean Berra. Back then, it was common practice for a team's first driver to borrow his teammate's car should anything happen to his. Fangio was running second when his steering arm snapped. He made it back to the pits, but his title dreams were shattered. Teammate Luigi Musso pitted and was ordered to hand over his car to Fangio, but he refused. Collins was now second, but was about to become the Argentine saviour. Thanks to his teammate, the Maestro rejoined the race, crossing the line second to win his 4th Formula One championship. Formula One has an ever-improving, lifelong commitment to safety, but one that in the early 1970s was only just taking its first steps. The 1973 Dutch Grand Prix was one of the sport's darkest hours. A host of mistakes and a lack of safety measures cost driver Roger Williamson his life in what was only his 2nd race in Formula One. On lap 8, Williamson's car suffered a left rear tyre failure and was sent into the barriers at high speed. The race was not yet stopped, with yellow flags being waved as the rest of the field passed by. Everyone except former Army officer David Purley. He witnessed the accident and sprinted across the track to help Williamson, trying in vain to turn the car over. Marshals were present, but with no protective clothing, they were unable to assist Purley, who snatched a fire extinguisher and tried to put the fire out himself. In spite of his tireless efforts, for which he would be awarded the George Medal for gallantry, he couldn't save his fellow driver, whose tragic loss showed just how much motorsport safety still had to improve. Just a few months earlier, the South African Grand Prix had witnessed another incredible act of heroism. This one, however, with a happy ending. When Mike Hailwood and Clay Regazzoni collided on lap 2, the Swiss driver was knocked unconscious, and his BRM caught fire. Hailwood rushed to his aid and tried to pull him to safety, only for his own clothing to be set alight. Hailwood's selfless actions saved Regazzoni's life and allowed him to be back on track for the next race in Spain, in spite of the burns. Ayrton Senna was not only one of the most talented drivers of all time, he also showed great humanity when it mattered the most. During qualifying for the 1992 Belgian Grand Prix, his friend Eric Comas suffered a heavy crash at Blanchimont that knocked him unconscious. When Senna drove past the crash scene, he heard that Comas was still pressing hard on the throttle. That meant fuel was still pumping into the engine, and there was a big risk of an explosion. Senna stopped his car and rushed to help, cutting off the Ligier's screaming engine, and Comas believes that Senna's actions that day saved his life. 2 years later in San Marino, Comas rushed in his car to Senna's aid, following his tragic accident at Imola, desperate to try and return the favour, but there was nothing that anyone could do. Senna's death had a deep impact on Comas. He withdrew from the race and retired from Formula One at the end of the season. Niki Lauda's heroic comeback to racing just a month after his horrific crash at the Nürburgring in 1976 is one of Formula One's most inspiring stories, one of personal drive and a will of steel. The story could, however, have been very different without the intervention of 4 drivers: Arturo Mazzario, Guy Edwards, Harold Ertl and Brett Lunger. After hitting the barrier, Lauda's Ferrari swerved off the track before bouncing back into the path of the oncoming cars and catching fire. Guy Edwards managed to avoid the blazing wreckage, but Ertl and Lunger both hit it. All 3 immediately raced to Lauda's aid. Just as Purley and Halewood 3 years previously, Guy Edwards was also awarded for his response, this time with the Queen's Gallantry Medal, having sustained second-degree burns to his hands in the dramatic rescue. Their determination in saving Lauda is perhaps matched only by the Austrian driver himself, who overcame his injuries to return just 3 races later at the Italian Grand Prix and resume his famous fight for the championship with James Hunt.
What it really means now is that whatever I do at Monza, when Niki comes back in Canada, that the situation is going to be very, very close, and so it's going to be a hell of a fight to the finish. So, I'm looking forward to seeing Niki back racing, but I'm not looking forward to the hard battle that we're going to have, because it's going to be really tough.
And if he comes back at Monza, what do you think?
Well, it starts all the sooner.